The sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse felt less like warmth and more like punishment. He groaned, throwing an arm across his face, his other hand blindly searching for the phone vibrating on the nightstand. The name flashing on the screen was unrecognizable. Just another number. Another voice from a past night blurred by champagne laughter and perfume he couldn't quite remember. "Who the hell is this?" His voice was hoarse, heavy with exhaustion. The woman on the other end laughed softly, making his temples throb. "She sounds familiar." Or, "I've heard too many laughs like hers." "Really? Will you forgot me already? After what happened in your car?" Her voice turned sulky, teasing and dangerous. William sat up, rubbing his temples. "You'll have to remind me." Blonde, brunette, curly hair. "I'm Monica." She snapped her sweetness, dissolving into sharpness. "Straight blonde hair. And don't you dare confuse me with another one of your girls." The line went dead before he could respond. William stared at the phone, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Another scandal waiting to happen. Another name he'd forget by tomorrow. He dragged himself out of bed, every muscle protesting. The previous night had stretched until dawn in his friend's nightclub downtown. Glass after glass of whiskey. Laughter echoes through the VIP lounge. Women orbited him like moths drawn to light his wealth, fame, and dangerous charm. He didn't chase. He never had to. And yet, beneath the arrogance, there was something else. Something William never admitted out loud. The fleeting moments after every party, when the silence of his penthouse felt unbearable. When he realized that no matter how many women whispered his name, none knew the sound of his heart when it broke. But it's better this way. No strings, no guilt, no pain. The shrill buzz of his doorbell dragged him out of thought. With a curse, William pulled on a robe and padded barefoot to the front door. "If this is another delivery of wine my mother ordered." But the words caught in his throat. 4 infant carriers sat neatly arranged in front of his door. 4, each with a tiny sleeping baby inside. For a second he thought he was hallucinating, that his hangover had spun into some cruel dream. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, but the image didn't disappear. Tiny fists, rising chests, soft sighs. What the? He exited the hall, scanning left and right, searching for whoever had left them there. The corridor was empty. Only silence. Only him, the babies, and the pounding of his own heart. One of the infants stirred, letting out a sharp, fragile cry that seemed to pierce his ribs. Panic surged through him, so raw and unfamiliar, it made his hands tremble. He crouched, staring into the wide, innocent eyes of a life that couldn't possibly belong to him. He noticed the folded paper tucked beneath the strap of the pink carrier. With hesitant fingers, William pulled it free and unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, desperate. "They're yours. Take care of them." For a moment, the world stopped moving. His breath hitched, his knees weakening as he looked from the note to the children, then back again. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't. This can't be." But deep down, a chill spread through him, a haunting possibility. He thought of Monica, of countless other women whose faces blurred together. And then, unbidden, he thought of the accident, the one night he could never fully remember. The scar still burned across his temple, the price of a car crash 6 years ago that had stolen pieces of his memory. What if this wasn't a cruel prank? What if the universe was finally calling him to account? The babies wailed louder, as if demanding an answer. 6 months later, the DNA results sat spread across his mahogany desk. 4 papers, 4 results. 99.9% probability. The words blurred, burned, mocked him. Charles, His longtime friend and physician leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed. "They're yours. Will all of them." William pressed his palms into his eyes. "I don't even know who their mother is." Charles's voice softened. "You've been searching your memories for years, but maybe this isn't about the past anymore. It could be about what you'll do now." William lifted his gaze. The babies were sleeping soundly in the adjoining room, their tiny breaths like whispers of fate. He had spent nights pacing with them in his arms, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or collapse. He had hired nannies, bought cribs, and filled his penthouse with toys and formula he had never imagined touching. Some mornings he stared at them and felt nothing but confusion. Other mornings, when one of them curled a fist around his finger, he felt something terrifyingly close to love. "I'm not walking away," William said at last, his voice steady. "I might have been reckless. I might have been a playboy, but I'll never abandon them." Charles's expression shifted admiration, hidden beneath worry. "Then welcome to fatherhood, my friend." 6 years later, Manhattan. William Harris was no longer the man who never slept alone. The tabloids still tried to paint him as the billionaire bad boy, but they were years too late. He rarely appeared at parties now. His nights belonged to bedtime stories and warm bottles, not champagne. His mornings began with little feet running across the marble floors of his penthouse, not the shuffle of women slipping out in heels. The quadruplets had become his world. There was Maxine, fiery and headstrong, Marion, tender but stubborn, Manuel, shy and thoughtful, and Max, his mischievous shadow. They filled the silence with laughter, arguments, and endless questions. They filled the void he never admitted he had. And yet, even as he tucked them in and watched them grow, the same unanswered question whispered at the edge of his mind. Who was their mother? And why had she disappeared? One evening after dinner, William stood at the window of his penthouse, staring at the glowing skyline. The children's laughter echoed faintly down the hall. He pressed his hand to the glass, his reflection merging with the city lights. He had money, power, influence. But what he didn't have, what he had never found, was closure. Somewhere out there, a woman knew the truth. Somewhere out there, his past waited for him. He thought of the accident again. The screech of tires, the flash of headlights. The memory that always stopped just short of a face, a name. The scar pulsed faintly on his temple. William Harris had changed. He was no longer a careless playboy. But the ghosts of his past weren't done with him yet, and soon he would discover that fate had been waiting all along. Grace Allen had learned long ago that silence could be both prison and weapon. Chicago's skyline glittered beyond the balcony of her apartment, but she barely noticed it. The glass of wine in her hand remained untouched, her dark eyes fixed on the city lights below. To anyone else, she might have looked serene, a successful woman returning from abroad, dressed in satin and pearls. But inside, her heart simmered like a volcano, lying in wait. "It's been 6 years," she whispered to herself. 6 years of silence. 6 years of pretending I had nothing left to fight for. Her phone buzzed on the table. A single name lit up the screen. Jean. "Tell me you've seen the envelope." Jean's voice crackled, steady and sharp. Grace's lips curled into a faint smile. "I have. Every file, every photograph, every recording. All of it. Felicity's spotless image won't survive what's inside." Jean exhaled, a hint of satisfaction in her laugh. "Then you're ready. There'll be no turning back once you attend your father's gala. Are you sure you want to start a war tonight?" Grace lifted her glass, but didn't drink. Her reflection in the wine's dark surface stared back at her eyes, hollow yet burning. "I've been quiet long enough, Jean. Felicity took everything from me. My dignity, my future, my children." Her voice cracked just slightly, but she forced it down. Weakness was a luxury she no longer allowed herself. She thinks she buried me. Grace continued, her tone sharpening, but she doesn't know that what she buried was a seed. And seeds grow back. The rain that night had been merciless. 8 months pregnant. Grace stumbled through the storm, one hand clutching her belly and the other gripping the suitcase that carried the last of her belongings. Her father's words echoed in her ears, words meant to cut, to condemn, to erase her. You've shamed this family. You will not stay under my roof another day. Her sister's voice had followed, silkier but deadlier. Don't look at me, Grace. You did this to yourself. You deserve what's coming. Grace had begged not for herself, but for the 4 lives moving restlessly inside her. But the Allen estate's grand doors closed with a finality that still haunted her dreams. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. And as the thunder split the sky, she didn't see the car until it was too late. The impact threw her to the ground, her suitcase scattering into the night. Pain like fire tore through her, and then darkness. When she woke in the sterile whiteness of the hospital, she thought she was safe, until the doctor approached, expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry, Miss Allen. Your babies didn't survive. We had to operate. There was nothing we could do. Grace remembered screaming, remembered clutching at the sheets until her nails broke, remembered believing with every fiber of her being that a part of her soul had been stolen. And then came silence. 6 years of it. Jean's voice pulled her back from the abyss of memory. Jean said gently that you don't have to do this alone. Grace closed her eyes, letting the words settle. Jean had been her anchor all these years, the one person who hadn't judged or abandoned her. But revenge was a solitary path, and Grace knew it was hers to walk. I'm not afraid of Felicity, she said. I'm so scared of becoming her. Then don't, Jean replied. Expose her. Take everything she treasures, but don't let her poison you. Grace finally sipped her wine, its bitterness grounding her. Don't worry. I won't need poison when the truth is sharp enough to cut. The Allen family's charity gala glittered with chandeliers and champagne. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled, cameras flashing as they whispered about the wealthy heirs and their perfect lives. Grace's heels clicked softly as she entered, her head held high, and her gown of deep emerald silk hugged her figure like armor. The crowd parted in confusion, shock rippling through the room. She hadn't been seen in 6 years. Her father froze near the stage, champagne flute trembling in his hand. Felicity, radiant in a silver gown, went pale beneath her makeup. Good evening, Grace said into the microphone as silence fell. Her voice was calm, but her pulse raced like a drum. I didn't come here for champagne or charity. I went with a gift. A special one for you, Father. The screen behind her flickered to life. Photographs appeared, grainy, damning, undeniable. Felicity in the arms of a married mayor. Felicity entering hotels under false names. Felicity wrapped in lies, dressed as silk. Gasps filled the ballroom. Felicity's perfect mask shattered in seconds. Happy birthday, Father, Grace whispered. I hope you enjoy the truth. She set the microphone down and walked off stage, her heart hammering. For 6 years, she had carried her pain in silence. Tonight, she had turned it into a blade. But revenge never came without blood, and Grace knew this was only the beginning. Later, seated in a quiet cafe near Central Park, Grace let her hands tremble for the first time. She sipped black coffee, staring at the rain-slick streets beyond the window. You should feel satisfied, she told herself. You got what you wanted. You saw her crumble. But satisfaction didn't come. Instead, loneliness pressed heavier than ever. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, an old habit she still hadn't broken. Once it had been instinct to protect the lives inside her. Now, it was only a ghost's embrace. Her phone buzzed again, Jean. You were brilliant, Jean said. The press is already tearing Felicity apart. Your father won't recover from this scandal either. Grace forced a small smile. Then why do I feel empty? Because you lost more than they'll ever understand, Jean replied softly. Grace closed her eyes. The cafe's warmth faded, replaced by the memory of tiny cries she never got to hear. She had fought for revenge, but the ache of motherhood still hollowed her, and fate wasn't finished with her yet. Leaving the cafe, Grace pulled her coat tighter against the wind. The city was alive with noise and movement, but she felt strangely apart until she noticed the shadow behind her. Footsteps. Too close. Too deliberate. She turned, catching a glimpse of a man in a leather jacket, his red cap pulled low. Her breath caught. Felicity's men, perhaps, sent to frighten her. Or worse. Her pulse quickened as she hurried through the mall's glass doors. Shoppers bustled around her oblivious. The man followed. Panic clawed up her throat. Desperate, she grabbed the nearest stranger by the arm, pulling him into her orbit. "I'm sorry," she whispered, breathless. "Please help me." The man turned, and for a moment, Grace forgot to breathe. Tall, sharply dressed, with a face both stern and strangely familiar, he radiated the kind of quiet authority that drew eyes without effort. His ice-blue gaze locked onto hers, brows knitting in surprise. Before she could speak again, he turned, nodding to mall security. Within minutes, the man in the red cap was gone, handcuffed, and dragged away. Grace stood frozen still, holding onto the stranger's sleeve. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low, steady. Then, with the faintest smirks, "Though next time go straight to security instead of ambushing a stranger." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She let go of his sleeve, stammering, "I didn't know what else to do." He studied her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then he turned, walking away without another word. Grace watched him go, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. There was something about him, something she couldn't shake. And though she didn't know it yet, that stranger, the man she had grabbed in desperation, was William Harris, the father of the children she had mourned for 6 long years. Grace didn't believe in coincidences. All her life, every turn of fate had felt deliberate, cruel, orchestrated by hands she couldn't see. Yet when she walked into that cafe near Central Park the following morning and saw him again, the stranger who had saved her from the man in the red cap, something stuttered. He was seated near the glass wall, sipping black coffee, eyes scanning through a stack of contracts, as if the world outside didn't exist. His presence drew attention effortlessly, like gravity. People glanced, then quickly looked away, as though his gaze might cut too deep. Grace froze. She could leave, slip out before he notices. But a voice inside her whispered, "Stay." And then he looked up. Those piercing blue eyes landed on her, recognition flickering. Slowly he set the papers aside and gestured to the empty seat across from him. Grace's legs moved before her doubts could catch up. "Twice in 2 days," he said, as she sat down, his tone somewhere between amused and suspicious. "Are you following me, miss?" She straightened her shoulders. "Allen. Grace Allen. And no, I don't follow strangers." A faint smirk touched his lips. William Harris. The name hit her like static. She'd heard it before on billboards and newspapers, whispered in the corporate corridors of Chicago. Billionaire investor. Tech mogul. The man who had once been New York's most infamous bachelor. And now he sat across from her, calm, unbothered, as if their meeting was the most natural thing in the world. Grace tilted her chin. "Should I thank you again for yesterday?" He stirred his coffee, eyes never leaving hers. "You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself better instincts." Her brows lifted. "Excuse me." "You looked terrified." William said evenly. But you dragged a stranger into your panic instead of going to security. If I hadn't helped, you'd be in more danger. His bluntness stung, but beneath it lay something else, concern unmasked and startling. Grace leaned back, her composure a fragile mask. I may have trusted the proper stranger. For a heartbeat, his gaze softened. Then, as if remembering himself, he looked away. Be careful who you trust, Miss Allen. People aren't always who they seem. Neither are you, she wanted to say, but she bit her tongue. They parted with polite goodbyes, yet the image of him lingered long after. His voice, eyes, and presence seemed to press against her walls. Grace hated how easily he unsettled her. She had come back to America with one purpose: revenge. There was no room for distraction, especially not from a man like William Harris. But fate once again had other plans. Rain pattered against the penthouse windows as William flipped pancakes in the kitchen. Behind him, chaos reigned. Dad Max took my crayons. No. Marion started it. Daddy Morgan won't stop barking. 4 voices tumbling over one another like a storm. William sighed, half smiling, despite the headache. Breakfast first, battles later. Pancakes solve everything. Not everything, Marion muttered, crossing her arms. The doorbell rang before he could respond. Frowning, William wiped his hands and walked to the door. Visitors weren't common. He kept his circle small for a reason. When he opened it, the last person he expected stood there. Grace Allen. Rain glistened on her coat, her curls damp around her face. She looked fragile and fierce, like the storm had delivered her to his doorstep. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then one of the children darted into view, tugging at William's sleeve. Daddy. Who's that? Grace's breath caught. The little girl staring up at her had William's eyes but her own nose, her own mouth. It was impossible. Or was it? William cleared his throat. Kids back inside. But they didn't move. The children gathered, 4 pairs of curious eyes fixed on Grace. Something warm and painful twisted in her chest. Their features blurred, overlapping with the faces she had imagined for 6 years. The children she believed had died before they could take their first breath. Are you? Daddy's friend Max asked boldly, clutching a toy car in one hand. Grace forced a smile, something like that. William's jaw tightened. He hadn't invited her here. He didn't even know why she had come, except that some part of him was strangely glad. The nanny appeared, ushering the children away, but not before Marion tugged at Grace's hand. You look nice, the girl whispered shyly before scampering off. Grace blinked back unexpected tears. William led her into the living room, sleek, yet softened by the chaos of family life. Crayons scattered on the coffee table, stuffed animals lined along the sofa. Why are you here? His tone was curt and defensive, but his eyes betrayed unease. Grace clasped her hands together, searching for steady words. I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd thank you properly for helping me at the mall. His brows arched. By showing up at my home. Heat rose to her cheeks. You're right. It was impulsive. I'll go. She turned, but his voice stopped her. Stay. The word hung between them, heavier than it should have been. William exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair. I don't usually let people into this part of my life. But the kids, they liked you. That doesn't happen often. Grace's chest tightened. They're wonderful. They're trouble, he corrected softly, though the pride in his voice betrayed him. Silence, stretched, charged, and fragile. Grace felt herself teetering on the edge of something dangerous. That night, long after Grace had left, William stood at the window, her image replaying in his mind. The way she had knelt instinctively when Marion tugged her hand, and her eyes softened at the children, as if she had known them all her life. He shook his head. Ridiculous. She was a stranger. And yet... Down the street in her hotel room, Grace pressed her palms to her face. The children's laughter still echoed in her ears. Each giggle, each glance felt like threads stitching into wounds she thought would never close. She couldn't explain it. She didn't want to. All she knew was that the stranger she had grabbed in desperation was no longer just a stranger. And perhaps for the first time in 6 years, Grace felt the faintest flicker of something dangerously close to hope. The invitation came casually, almost reluctantly. William stood by the elevator of his Manhattan headquarters, adjusting his tie, his expression unreadable. Grace had stopped by with documents for a nonprofit her friend Jean was supporting, and somehow their paths crossed. Before she could retreat, his voice cut through the hum of the lobby. "Come by this weekend. The kids asked about you." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "Are you sure?" He met her gaze, the sharp lines of his face softening just slightly. "I don't invite people twice, Miss Allen. Please don't make me regret it the first time." It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But the words tugged at something deep inside her. The sound of children laughing greeted her before the door even opened. Grace smoothed the skirt of her dress, nerves fluttering in her stomach. She had walked into courtrooms, board meetings, and her father's gala dripping with vengeance. But nothing had unsettled her as much as facing 4 children who weren't supposed to exist. The door swung open. Grace Marion barreled forward, her braids bouncing, arms outstretched. Grace froze for a heartbeat before kneeling to catch the girl. Warmth filled her chest as Marion clung to her as if they'd known each other forever. Behind her, Max grinned mischievously. "You came back. Good. Now you can tell Dad to stop burning pancakes." From the kitchen came William's voice, dry but laced with amusement. They weren't burned. They were rustic. Grace laughed, the sound surprising even herself. Breakfast was chaos. Sticky syrup, fingers juice spilled across the marble counter. Arguments over which cartoon character was better. Grace found herself laughing, guiding little hands, wiping chins, answering endless questions. "Do you have kids?" Maxine asked innocently, her wide eyes piercing through Grace's heart. Grace swallowed, forcing a smile. "No, sweetheart. Not yet." The lie scraped her throat, but what else could she say? "I once carried 4 lives just like you, and I've mourned them every day since." Across the table, William watched her. His gaze was steady, searching, as though he could sense the weight of what she didn't say. After breakfast, the children dragged her into their world-building forts from pillows, playing hide-and-seek among the penthouse's sleek hallways, drawing colorful stick figures that somehow looked suspiciously like her. And in each moment, Grace felt something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Belonging. Later, when the children had collapsed into an afternoon nap, Grace stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched beneath her, restless and bright. She leaned against the railing, trying to steady the storm inside her. "You're good with them." She turned. William stood in the doorway, tied discarded sleeves rolled up. The sunlight caught the angles of his jaw, the scar near his temple. "They're good kids," she replied softly. "They need someone to listen." His eyes lingered on her. "Not many people make them laugh like that. Not even me." Grace smiled faintly. "That's because you're their father. Fathers aren't supposed to be funny. They're supposed to be safe." The word slipped out before she could stop it, and she saw something flicker across his face. Something vulnerable. "Safe," he repeated almost to himself. "That's not a word most people would use for me." "Maybe most people don't know you," she countered gently. Silence stretched between them, momentarily charged with something neither dared to name. That night, Grace sat in her hotel room, still replaying the children's laughter, William's guarded smile. For the first time in years, her chest didn't feel hollow. and that terrified her. Her phone buzzed. Jean again. You disappeared all day. Don't tell me you were with him. Grace hesitated. I was with his children. Jean's sigh was sharp. Grace, listen to me. You came back here to destroy Felicity, to make your father pay, not to fall into some fairy tale with a man who doesn't even know your story. Grace closed her eyes. It's not a fairy tale. It's... She broke off, her throat tight. Jean, when I'm with them, it feels like I've been given back something I thought was gone forever. There was silence on the line. Then Jean's voice softened. I know you lost more than anyone deserves. But don't let a stranger fill that void. Not when your real fight isn't over. Grace ended the call staring at her reflection in the window. She wanted to believe Jean was wrong. She tried to believe destiny had finally given her a gift. But the shadow of betrayal of stolen years still lingered. And Felicity Allen was already plotting her next move somewhere in New York. Days turned into weeks. Grace found herself at the Harris penthouse, more often always under the pretense of helping with the children, always careful to guard her heart. Yet the wall between her and William was fragile. Some evenings they shared wine after the kids were asleep, conversations weaving between light laughter and sudden silences. He told her about the accident that had stolen pieces of his memory. She told him, just enough to make him curious, never the whole truth. One night, as the city hummed below, he asked quietly, Why do you always look at them like you're about to cry? Her breath caught, because they remind me of what I lost. It was the closest she had come to admitting the truth. His eyes softened, but he didn't press further. Perhaps he sensed that some wounds needed time to reveal themselves. The turning point came unexpectedly. They were in the kitchen preparing dinner together. Grace chopping vegetables, William stirring a pot on the stove. Their shoulders brushed once-twice until the air felt heavier than it should have. When she reached for a glass above the counter, he moved simultaneously, their hands colliding. For a moment, their fingers tangled, neither pulling away. Grace looked up, breath shallow, into eyes that seemed to see past every wall she had built. William. Her name on his lips was soft, almost reverent. But before the space between them could collapse, a child's voice pierced the air. Daddy Grace. We're hungry. The spell shattered. William stepped back, clearing his throat. Grace forced a smile, retreating into motion, into safety. But deep down, both knew something had shifted. That night, as Grace tucked Marion into bed, the little girl whispered, Will you be our mommy? Grace froze, her heart pounding. She smoothed Marion's hair, pressing a trembling kiss to her forehead. Sleep now, sweetheart. But when she stepped out of the room, tears burned her eyes. Because for the first time, the line between past and present, grief and hope, was blurring. And she didn't know if she was strong enough to stop it. The Allen name still haunted Grace like a curse. She had spent weeks wrapped in the laughter of William's children, her evenings caught between shy smiles and almost accidental touches with him. But every time she allowed herself to breathe and feel, Jean's voice returned. You came back for justice, not love. And she knew Jean was right. Still, when William called her on a Thursday evening and asked, Join us for dinner tomorrow, the kids insisted she couldn't bring herself to say no. The table was crowded with plates, pasta, garlic bread, and a salad none of the children touched. Grace laughed as Max pretended his fork was a sword, Marion squealed in mock protest, and Manuel quietly slipped his vegetables onto his brother's plate. William sat at the head of the table, arms folded, watching the chaos with a kind of helpless amusement. Now and then his gaze drifted to Grace, lingering longer than it should. You make it look easy, he murmured as she calmed the children with a gentle word. Grace met his eyes. It isn't. But love makes it easier. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Silence stretched heavier than the clatter of dishes. William's jaw tightened, something unreadable in his expression. Love. Neither spoke it again, but the word hovered like uninvited music. After dinner, the children scattered to their rooms. Grace stepped out onto the balcony, city lights glittering below. The air smelled faintly of rain. William joined her, leaning against the railing. For a while they said nothing. Then he asked softly, "Why do you always look sad when you think no one's watching?" Grace's breath caught. "Do I?" "You do." His gaze was steady, almost too much to bear. "It's like you're carrying ghosts." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything: the night of the storm, the accident, the babies she thought were gone. But fear clenched around her heart. If she spoke, she risked everything. So instead she whispered, "We all have ghosts, William, some louder than others." His eyes lingered on her, as if weighing the truth behind her words. He didn't push, but their silence was different now, less comfortable, more fragile. The next day, Grace met Jean at a cafe downtown. Jean accused you of falling for him, stirring her coffee too sharply. Grace sighed. "Jean. No, please don't deny it. I see it in your face." "But Grace, remember why you came back. Felicity destroyed you. Your father abandoned you. Are you going to forget all that because a billionaire with blue eyes makes you feel safe?" Grace flinched. Jean's words struck too close. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Jean snapped. Then her voice softened. "I love you, Grace. I stood by you when no one else did. Don't let this man become another distraction from the truth. Don't let him blind you." Grace stared at her reflection in the coffee's dark surface. A woman torn between fire and tenderness stared back. "I'm not blind," she whispered. "I'm just tired of the dark." That night, William drove Grace home after an evening with the children. The car was silent, the city's glow flickering across his face. Finally, he spoke. "You know a lot about children. Too much for someone who claims she doesn't have any." Grace stiffened. "I read. I watch." He interrupted, voice low. "You look at them like you've lost them before." Her heart lurched. He was too close to the truth. "William." But he shook his head. "Forget it. I'm overthinking." The conversation ended there, but the unease lingered sharp as glass. Meanwhile, Felicity Allen was not silent. In her Upper East Side apartment, she sat with a glass of red wine, watching photographs spread across the table. Photos of Grace entering William's penthouse. Grace holding his children's hands. Grace smiling beside him. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "So this is where you've been hiding, little sister?" "Playing house with William Harris." She set the glass down, eyes glinting. "But let's see how long this dream lasts, when the truth burns through it." One evening, a sudden storm trapped Grace at William's penthouse. Thunder rattled the windows, and the children huddled under blankets. Grace read them stories until their eyelids drooped. Later, she found herself in the kitchen with William, both nursing glasses of wine. "Storms make the city feel smaller," she said softly. He nodded. "Storms make the past louder." She looked up sharply. His eyes were on her, unwavering. "Tell me, Grace. What's your past hiding from me?" Her chest ached. For a moment, she nearly told him everything. But fear silenced her. Instead, she said, "Some stories are too painful to tell." His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He whispered, "One day, I hope you'll trust me enough to tell them anyway." The words lingered between them, tender and accusing all at once. From then on, their bond shifted. William was gentler, but more cautious. Grace felt his eyes on her, searching, questioning. She longed to bridge the distance, but every step closer risked unraveling the fragile secret she carried. And beneath it all, the children grew more attached. Marion slipped drawings into her purse, stick figures of a family, with Grace holding hands beside them. Max asked when she would sleep over. Manuel whispered, "You feel like Mommy." Each word pierced her heart deeper. At night, alone in her hotel room, she pressed her hand to her chest and wondered how long she could live in this fragile space between truth and love. The answer came sooner than she expected. One afternoon, as she walked out of a bookstore, she caught sight of a familiar figure waiting by the curb. Felicity. Her sister's smile was sharp as glass. Well, well. The lost Alan's sister playing stepmother to a billionaire's children. How poetic. Grace froze, her pulse pounding. "What do you want?" Felicity's eyes gleamed. "To remind you that happiness doesn't belong to you. And soon neither will William Harris. I'll make sure of it." She leaned closer, whispering like venom, "You think secrets don't rot? Wait until he learns yours." Grace's blood ran cold. That night, when she returned to the penthouse, William was waiting. His expression was hard, unreadable. "I ran into someone today," he said quietly. "A woman. She said she knew you." Grace's heart stopped. "Who?" Felicity. "Alan." His eyes bored into hers. "She said you're hiding something. Something I deserve to know." The room spun. The children's laughter echoed faintly down the hall. A cruel reminder of what she stood to lose. And for the first time since she had met William Harris, Grace realized she was standing at the edge of everything love, family, vengeance, and one step in the wrong direction could destroy it all. The silence between them was louder than any storm. Grace stood in William's penthouse living room, her coat still clinging to the damp of the evening. His children's voices drifted faintly from down the hall, muffled laughter that should have been a comfort. Instead, it pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't carry. William's gaze was fixed on her, sharp and unrelenting. The softness she had begun to know in him was gone, replaced by the steel of a man who'd built his empire on certainty and control. "Who is she to you?" His voice was calm, but the undercurrent was dangerous. "Felicity Allen." She said, "You're not who you claim to be." Grace's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her sister's name on his tongue felt like a knife twisting open wounds she had fought to bury. "I told you before," William continued. "I don't easily let people into this part of my life. And yet I let you near my children, near me. So tell me, what are you hiding?" Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She wanted to tell him everything. The night of the rain, the accident, the truth stolen from her. But the fear of rejection was a prison she had never escaped. "William," she whispered, "please, not like this." His jaw tightened. "Then how?" Grace moved toward the window, her hands trembling against the glass. Outside, Manhattan glowed, indifferent to the battle raging in her chest. "I had a family once," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Or at least I thought I did. Then it was taken from me. And I've lived every day since trying to breathe through that emptiness." William's eyes narrowed, studying her. "Taken how?" Her throat closed. She couldn't bring herself to say the words, not yet. Not when the truth could tear apart the fragile threads holding her to this man, to his children. So she shook her head. "It's a story you wouldn't believe." Silence stretched. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You're asking me to trust you. But trust doesn't grow in shadows, Grace. It dies there." The words struck deep. 2 days later, William sat in his office, his focus shattered by the folder that had been delivered anonymously. Inside were photographs Grace, leaving a hospital 6 years ago, her face pale, her body frail. Newspaper clippings about the Allen scandal. Headlines whispering about disgrace, about shame. At the very end, Felicity's handwriting scrawled across a note. Would you really trust the woman who lied about her own children? William's hand clenched around the page. He hated Felicity. Her arrogance was infamous in New York society. But doubt gnawed at him. Could Grace truly have hidden something so enormous? And if she had, why hadn't she told him? That night, Grace returned to the penthouse, carrying a bag of books for the children. Their delight was immediate. Marion tugged her toward the playroom. Maxine proudly showed her a drawing, and Manuel whispered that she smelled like flowers. But William's silence was colder than the January air outside. When the children were asleep, he confronted her again. He placed the folder on the table between them. Her blood turned to ice. Is this you? His voice was quiet, too quiet. Grace stared at the photographs, the headlines her past bleeding into the present. She closed her eyes, every scar reopening. Yes. William's chest rose and fell sharply. And you never thought to tell me. Tears burned her eyes. How could I? How could I make you look at me and see failure? See disgrace? I wanted to be more than my past. You should have trusted me to decide that. He said, his tone raw, wounded. Her hands shook as she reached for him. William, please. I didn't come here to deceive you. I came here because... Her voice broke. Because with you with them, I feel alive again. His expression wavered, but the shadows of doubt lingered. The next morning, Grace found Marion sitting alone on the balcony, clutching a teddy bear. Why are you sad, Tita Grace? The girl asked, eyes wide and innocent. Grace knelt beside her, heart breaking. Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes hurt the people they love. Marion leaned against her. Daddy makes mistakes too, but we still love him. Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks. Do you think you could still love me even if I made mistakes? Marion nodded solemnly. You feel like Mommy. Mommy's supposed to stay even if she's not perfect. Grace's chest ached with both joy and sorrow. If only you knew, my sweet girl. If only you knew. William avoided her that day, burying himself in work. When Grace tried to speak, he deflected with curt replies. The warmth they had shared now felt fragile, brittle, as though one wrong word could shatter it completely. Jean called that evening, her tone sharp. He's doubting you, isn't he? I told you this would happen. This is why I warned you. Grace's voice shook. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to love him. Jean pressed. The silence on the line was answer enough. The storm broke sooner than Grace expected. One night, as William drove home with the children, another car swerved recklessly, nearly forcing them off the road. Tires screeched, horns blared. The children screamed. Only William's sharp reflexes kept disaster at bay. When the car sped off, he caught a glimpse of the driver. Felicity's cold smile flashed before the vehicle disappeared into the night. The police arrived too late, but the message was clear: this wasn't an accident. And in the chaos, William's anger turned toward Grace. This is her war. His voice shook with fury. Your sister, your family. You brought this danger into my children's lives. Grace's breath caught. William, no, I never wanted. But he cut her off. Wanting doesn't erase the truth. And the truth is, my children almost died tonight because of you. Her knees buckled beneath the weight of his words. Later, after the children were safe in bed, Grace stood at the door, her bag in hand. William leaned against the wall, his face shadowed. He didn't tell her to stay. He didn't ask her to go. So she whispered, I love them. And I think I love you. But maybe love isn't enough to erase the past. His jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Grace, he said finally, his voice low ragged. If you want me to believe you, then stop hiding. Tell me everything, or walk away. The choice hung in the air, heavy as fate. And as she stepped into the night rain falling around her, Grace knew she could no longer escape the truth. The only question was whether William would still be there when she finally found the courage to speak it. The rain hadn't stopped since the night Grace walked out of William's penthouse. She stood by her hotel window, watching drops slide down the glass, like tears she could not shed anymore. The city outside was alive, relentless, but inside her room it felt as if time had paused, leaving only the echo of William's words, "Tell me everything, or walk away." She had walked away, but every step since then had been agony. 2 days later, her phone buzzed an unknown number. Grace Allen. The voice was calm, professional. "This is Detective Arnold. We're investigating the incident involving William Harris and his children. Mr. Harris requested your presence." Her chest tightened. He wanted her there despite everything. She almost said no. But then she thought of Marion's drawings, Manuel's shy smile, Max's jokes, Maxine's quiet warmth. The children who called to a part of her she thought had died. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll come." The Harris penthouse looked different when she returned. The light seemed harsher, the air heavier. William was waiting in the living room, a storm behind his eyes. The children were upstairs, the detective by his side. Grace's voice trembled. "Why did you call me back?" "Because William said his tone clipped before I decide what place you have in their lives or mine. I need to know if anything you've told me has ever been real." His words cut deep, but she nodded. "Then you deserve the truth." Her hands shook as she spoke. 6 years ago, I was 8 months pregnant. My father, furious, ashamed, threw me out. Felicity made sure he believed I was nothing but a disgrace. I wandered into the storm that night, clinging to what little hope I had left. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. I was hit by a car. I woke up in the hospital. They told me my babies didn't make it, that they were gone. For years I believed it. For years I carried their absence like a stone in my chest. Tears blurred her vision. Until I met your children, William. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in so long. They felt like mine, as if fate was mocking me, or maybe trying to heal me. The room was silent, but for her trembling breaths. William's eyes softened, but suspicion lingered. And you never questioned it, never demanded answers. I was broken, she admitted. When the world tells you your children are dead, you don't argue. You survive. For the first time, William looked away, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then someone lied to you, deliberately. And if someone did that," his voice hardened, "then this isn't just about your past. It's about mine, and about them." Grace's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he called the detective closer. "Dig deeper. I don't care what it takes. I want every record, every detail about what happened to Grace Allen that night. And I like it fast." The detective nodded. Grace exhaled shakily. For the first time in years, her burden wasn't hers alone. Later that evening, Grace found herself in the playroom. The children swarmed her as if nothing had changed. "Tita." "Grace, you came back," Marion squealed, throwing her arms around her. Max grinned. "We thought Dad scared you away." She laughed through her tears. "No, sweetheart. I just needed time." Manuel tugged at her sleeve. His eyes were serious. Too serious for his age. "Don't leave again. Please." Grace knelt, cupping his face. "I promise, Manuel. I'll fight to stay even if the whole world tries to push me away." The words felt like a vow, not just to him, but to herself. Across town, Felicity was not idle. She poured another glass of wine as a manila envelope slid across her desk. Inside were surveillance photos of Grace entering William's penthouse, walking hand in hand with the children, smiling at William like she belonged. Felicity's smile was cold. "Perfect," she murmured. "I'll give him a reason, if William won't let go of her alone. And this time, little sister, you won't crawl back from it." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Grace and William sat across from each other. The air was heavy with everything unspoken. "You should hate me," Grace whispered, "for not telling you sooner, for bringing this chaos into your life." William leaned forward, his eyes fierce. "I don't hate you, but I don't know if I can trust you. And without trust, what are we?" Her heart twisted. "Then let me earn it. Give me a chance to prove I'm not the enemy." He hesitated, then nodded once. "One chance. That's all I can give." 2 days later, the detective returned with something that changed everything. He placed a thin file on the table. William opened it, his brows furrowing as he scanned the pages. Grace leaned closer, her pulse racing. Inside were medical records, a DNA test. The results confirmed what Grace had never dared to hope: genetic matches between her and the Harris children. Her breath caught. "No, it can't be." William looked at her, his face pale with shock. "Grace, they're yours." The room spun. Memories of that storm, the hospital, the lies she had swallowed for years, everything crashed into her at once. "My babies," she whispered, tears streaming freely. "They're alive." William reached for her, his own hands trembling. "And they've been with me all this time." The truth settled between them, fragile and explosive. But before relief could take root, the detective added quietly, "There's more." The records were altered. Someone wanted Grace to believe her children were dead. And the trail, it leads back to the Allen family. Grace's eyes widened, fury igniting in her chest. Of course. Felicity. That night, when the children were asleep, William found Grace on the balcony. She stood staring into the night, her hands clenched. "They stole them from me," she whispered. "They stole 6 years of my life." William stepped beside her. "And now we know the truth. But it won't end here. Whoever did this, whoever tried to tear you from them, will pay." She looked up at him, tears glistening. "William, I don't know if I'm strong enough." He took her hand firm and steady. "Then lean on me. Because I swear, Grace, I won't let them take anything from you again." The promise was quiet, but it burned between them like fire. The truth had been a double-edged sword. Grace lay awake in William's penthouse guest room, the DNA file still clutched against her chest. Her children slept just a few doors away, unaware that the woman who had kissed their foreheads goodnight was more than just Tita Grace. Joy pulsed through her, raw and trembling. Yet, with every heartbeat came rage. 6 years stolen. 6 years of absence, of grief, of believing she was barren of love. And at the center of that theft stood Felicity. The morning came with laughter. Grace entered the kitchen to find Marion perched on the counter, trying to sneak chocolate chips into pancake batter. "Mommy." Oh, Marion froze, her cheeks pink. "I mean, Tita Grace." Grace's breath hitched. The slip was innocent, but it pierced her soul. She smiled, steadying her voice. "It's all right, sweetheart. Call me whatever feels right." From the table, Max grinned. "Then we'll call you Mommy Grace. Easier." Grace's eyes burned. William entered just then, pausing at the sight. Something softened in his expression, a quiet acknowledgement of a truth neither of them had dared say aloud. They were already a family. But Felicity would not let them breathe. By noon, headlines exploded across New York's gossip columns. "Fallen Allen daughter resurfaces." Targeting Billionaire Harris. Scandalous past. Grace Allen's lost children and hidden lies. Grace's phone buzzed non-stop with messages, some cruel, some pitying. She stared at the screen, her hands shaking. They twisted everything she whispered. They're making it sound like I abandoned my babies. William took the phone from her, his jaw tight. Let them talk. My lawyers will handle it. But the damage. He cut her off, voice steady but fierce. Grace, look at me. They can't erase the truth. Not anymore. Not when we have proof. His certainty steadied her, if only for a moment. That night, after the children were asleep, Grace found herself in the library with William. The fire crackled, casting warm light over his face. I don't deserve this, she whispered. You, them, any of it. William stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. Stop saying that. You were robbed, Grace. But now you're here. With them. With me. Her chest tightened. And if Felicity destroys it all, he leaned in his forehead against hers. Then we fight. Together. The kiss followed was not desperate but sure, a seal of their vow. For the first time, Grace felt not just love, but belonging. The following days were fragile, but golden. Grace helped the children with homework, taught Maxine how to braid her hair, and listened. As Manuel confessed he was afraid of thunderstorms, each moment stitched years of absence into threads of new memory. One evening, Marion crawled into her lap with a book. Mommy Grace, will you always stay? Grace kissed her curls, her heart aching. Yes, baby, always. But in the doorway, William watched, his eyes shadowed. He knew promises were fragile things, and Felicity was sharpening her knives. In her penthouse, Felicity clinked glasses with a senator's wife. Photographs and contracts lay spread before them. Public opinion is a game, Felicity said smoothly. And my sister. She doesn't know the rules. She slid a check across the table. Release the reports tomorrow. By the end of the week, Grace Allen won't just be disgraced, she'll be unfit to be near children. The woman smiled coldly. Consider it done. William's lawyer stormed into the penthouse 2 days later with grim news. The Child Welfare Department received an anonymous complaint. They're investigating whether the children are safe with Miss Allen in the house. Grace's world tilted. What but why fabricated records? The lawyer replied. Hospital notes claim you were unstable after the accident. Psychiatric evaluations false, but convincing enough. It's everywhere now. Grace's knees buckled. She's trying to take them from me again. William caught her before she fell. His voice was steel. She won't succeed. Not this time. I'll burn every bridge she's built before I let her touch them. The investigation began the next day. Officials arrived polite, but probing, asking the children questions that made Grace's stomach twist. Do you feel safe with Miss Allen? Does she ever make you afraid? Max crossed his arms stubbornly. She's our mommy. She makes pancakes, not scary things. The officials scribbled notes unconvinced. Grace smiled for the children's sake, but inside, she shattered. That night, she curled on the balcony, tears streaming. William joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. They'll believe her lies, she whispered. They'll take them from me again. Not if I can help it, he vowed. Grace, listen to me. You're their mother, and I'll fight beside you until the last breath. Do you understand? She looked at him, at the fire in his eyes, and for the first time believed she was not alone in this war. Days later, Detective Arnold returned breathless, clutching a folder. We found something. Inside were bank records, transfers, and signed statements. Felicity had paid doctors, nurses, and even officials to falsify reports the night of Grace's accident. She had orchestrated everything, ensuring Grace believed her babies were dead. But that wasn't the only revelation. "Look here," the detective said, pointing at a signature. William's eyes widened. "No, it can't be." Grace leaned over, her blood running cold. The name scrawled at the bottom wasn't just Felicity's. It was their father's. The betrayal was more profound than she ever imagined. Grace sat in the garden that night, the city lights flickering beyond. Her hands trembled around the folder. "My own father," she whispered. "He chose Felicity's lies over me. He signed away my children." William knelt beside her, cupping her face. "Grace, look at me. You have them now. You have me. He can't erase that." But her tears fell unstoppable. "How do I fight someone who was supposed to protect me?" William's voice was fierce, unyielding. "You don't fight him alone. We do this together. And when we win, he'll never touch you or the children again." Grace leaned fully into him for the first time, letting his strength hold her upright. And in that moment, as the night pressed close, they knew the battle was no longer just against Felicity. It was against the entire Allen legacy. The city was merciless. By dawn, Grace's name was everywhere. Talk shows dissected her past, newspapers splashed headlines about her return from disgrace, and social media burned with speculation. Was she fit to be a mother, or just another scandal hungry for Harris's wealth? William slammed the paper down on the breakfast table. His children stared at the bold letters, too young to understand their cruelty, but old enough to sense something was wrong. "Daddy, why are they saying bad things about Mommy?" "Grace," Marion asked, her lip trembling. Grace knelt, forcing a smile, though her chest was heavy. "People sometimes say things that aren't true, sweetheart, but the truth always finds its way back." William met her eyes, silent, but his grip on her hand was iron. Within days, Felicity's campaign reached its peak. Talk show hosts invited psychologists to speculate about Grace's unstable state. Leaked files, fabricated but polished, showed medical notes of breakdowns that never happened. Grace's lawyer paced the penthouse living room. "They're pushing for an emergency hearing. If the court believes any of this, child welfare could recommend removing the children from your care." Grace's knees weakened. "No, they can't. They're mine." William stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Then we fight harder. My lawyers will bury this in evidence and counterclaims. No judge will take them from us." But in the privacy of her room that night, Grace whispered into the dark, "What if they win? What if history repeats itself?" The shadows did not answer. The next blow came from her own blood. Her father, Charles Allen Sr., appeared in a televised interview. His hair was silver now, and his expression was the practiced calm of a man used to power. "I grieve for my daughter," he said smoothly, "but Grace has struggled with delusions since her accident. I did what any father would, protected the family, protected her. If she believes those children are hers, it's only because she refuses to accept reality." Grace's breath shattered as she watched the broadcast. "Protected me," she whispered. "He destroyed me." William muted the screen, his jaw tight with fury. "Then we expose him. We'll prove everything he's hiding. Grace, he doesn't get to write your story anymore." Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with something more substantial than despair fire. In the midst of chaos, the children clung tighter to Grace. At bedtime, Max asked, "If they try to take you away, can we run away too?" Her chest broke. She hugged him close. "No, baby. We don't run. We fight together. And Mommy Grace isn't going anywhere." The words were a promise she carved into the very marrow of her soul. William watched from the doorway and whispered the truth aloud for the first time. "They're not just your children, Grace. They're ours." The simple word "ours" held her together through the storm. But Felicity was not done. An invitation arrived, a charity gala hosted by the Allen Foundation. Her father signed the note, and the handwriting was formal but deliberate. "You must come," it read. Face your past if you want your future. Grace's lawyer advised against it. William bristled. It's a trap. But Grace's resolve hardened. If I keep hiding, they win. If I want the world to believe me, I must stand in the light. I have to face them. William stared at her, torn. Finally, he nodded. Then I'll be beside you. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne. The city's elite gathered whispering as Grace and William entered together. Cameras flashed, questions were shouted, but William's arm around her waist was unyielding. At the far end, Felicity stood in a crimson gown, her smile sharp as glass. Beside her, their father looked every inch the statesman. The evening unfolded like a theater. Grace greeted old acquaintances, enduring polite smirks and cutting remarks. William shielded her where he could, but the air grew heavier every hour. Then, as the orchestra paused, Felicity stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she purred, tonight is about truth. And in honor of truth, I present evidence that will shock us all. The screens behind her flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the room. Grace in the hospital years ago screaming, begging her body weak from the accident. Doctors' voices off-camera declared the baby's stillborn. Nurses carried away bundles wrapped in white. Gasps rippled through the crowd. See, Felicity's voice rang out. My sister clings to fantasies. But William Harris, ask yourself, is this the woman you entrust with children? Grace's knees buckled. William caught her fury blazing in his eyes. This is fabricated, he roared, every frame, every word. And you know it. But the crowd murmured, doubt spreading like wildfire. Her father rose from the table, expression heavy with false sorrow. Forgive her. She doesn't know what she's doing. Grace's voice cracked as she shouted across the room. Liar, you stole them from me. Both of you. The silence that followed was deafening. Security swarmed. Reporters shouted questions. William pulled Grace toward the exit, but the damage was done. The narrative was now poisoned. The images burned into the city's mind. Outside, flashbulbs exploded. A reporter screamed, Grace Allen, are you unfit to be a mother? Grace froze, tears streaming. For one terrifying moment, she felt the weight of history repeating, being silenced, erased, powerless. But then, William gripped her shoulders, his voice firm in her ear. Don't let them define you. Not anymore. She inhaled, shaky, but determined. She faced the cameras. My name is Grace Allen, and those children are mine. The lies may be loud, but the truth will not die. Not again. Her voice trembled, but it carried. And she saw flickers of doubt in the crowd for the first time, not in her, but in Felicity. That night, back at the penthouse, William's phone buzzed. It was Detective Arnold. I thought you should know, the detective said grimly. We traced the footage Felicity played tonight. It was edited and spliced together with false audio. And the original tapes. They were destroyed years ago by Charles Allen Sr. William's grip on the phone tightened. So he's the mastermind. Not just him, the detective replied. We have reason to believe Felicity isn't working alone. There's someone else funding this, someone powerful. William's blood ran cold. Who? We don't have the name yet, Arnold admitted. But whoever it is, they're close. Too close. He ended the call, turning to Grace. Her eyes were wide, searching his face. What now? She whispered. William pulled her into his arms, his voice low and certain. Now we stop hiding. We take this fight into the light. And we win. The storm was far from over, but for the first time they faced it not as strangers bound by secrets, but as partners bound by truth. The night after the gala was heavy with silence. Grace sat curled on the couch in William's penthouse, her body trembling though the fire blazed warm. William sat across from her, the world's weight in his eyes. The children slept upstairs, unaware of the war raging beyond their doors. The video Felicity had released still played in the city's veins. Every news outlet dissected it. Every critic sharpened their knives. Yet Grace's voice at the exit, the trembling vow that those children were hers, had struck a chord too. And for the first time, the city was divided. But division was not enough. They needed the truth. Detective Arnold arrived at dawn, exhaustion etched into his face. He laid a thick folder on the table. "We dug deeper," he said. "Felicity's money trail is clear. But she didn't fund this alone. There's a shadow account, millions funneled through international banks. And the signature on the authorization belongs to—" He hesitated, then looked directly at Grace. "Your father." Grace's breath caught. "I knew he betrayed me. But why? Why would a father destroy his own child?" Arnold's voice was grim. Because Charles Allen Sr. wasn't protecting Felicity. He was defending himself. 6 years ago, business rivals threatened to expose his corruption. Your pregnancy gave him a convenient distraction. He let Felicity stage the lie. Let the world believe you were broken, so no one would question the Allen Empire's cracks. Grace's heart shattered anew. Betrayal from a sister was cruel. Betrayal from a father was annihilation. William's hand found hers, steady, anchoring. Then it's time the world sees who they really are. The following week, blurred with preparation. Lawyers, investigators, allies, all rallied behind them. William poured his resources into the case, but more than wealth, it was his conviction that held Grace upright. One evening, as they sorted documents, Grace whispered, "What if the world never believes me?" William turned his gaze, unwavering. "Then I'll believe you enough for all of them. But the world is ready for truth, Grace, and you're strong enough to give it to them." Her tears fell silently. For the first time in years, they weren't born of despair, but hope. The courtroom overflowed. Cameras lined the steps outside, reporters jostling for angles. Inside, Grace sat with William's hand warm around hers, the children's drawings tucked secretly into her bag for strength. Felicity arrived in crimson again, her smile sharp. Their father followed, composed, statesmanlike, as though this were another political stage. But when the evidence began to unravel, their composure cracked. Bank transfers, witness testimonies, doctors confessing to falsifying reports under pressure. Nurses revealed they were ordered to hide the truth of the births. Then, the DNA results were projected on the screen. Scientific, undeniable Grace Allen was the biological mother of William Harris's children. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The judge's gavel struck for silence. Grace's chest rose and fell, as if she had surfaced from drowning. For 6 years, she had carried a coffin in her heart. Now, finally, she breathed. Felicity rose to speak, but her voice cracked. "She's lying. She manipulated." The judge cut her off sharply. "Enough, Ms. Allen. The evidence is irrefutable, and your part in fabricating records is now a matter for the district attorney." Felicity's mask shattered. She screamed, lunged, but officers restrained her. As she was dragged away, her eyes burned into Grace's, not with guilt, but with venom. "You'll never deserve happiness," she spat. Grace's reply was quiet, steady. "And you'll never steal it again." Her father did not rage. He did not beg. He lowered his head as evidence of his corruption spilled forth. Offshore accounts, illegal contracts, lies built on lies. For once, Charles Allen Sr. had no speech polished enough to save him. Grace looked at him, her voice trembling but strong. "You called it protection. But fathers don't protect by destroying. You didn't lose me tonight, Father. You lost yourself. The gavel fell. The case was over. Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through clouds. The city's roar was deafening, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. Grace stepped into the light, William at her side, their children rushing into her arms. "Mommy." "Grace, did we win?" Marion asked, her little voice fierce with hope. Grace hugged them all, her tears falling freely. "Yes, baby, we won." But in truth, it wasn't victory she tasted. It was freedom. That evening, William gathered the children in the garden of his estate. Twinkling lights hung in the trees, and laughter filled the air. Grace arrived unaware of the surprise waiting. Marion held a whiteboard. Max carried a velvet box. Maxine and Manuel showered her with petals as William stepped forward. He knelt, his voice rich with emotion. "Grace Allen. For 6 years, fate tried to keep us apart. But no lie, no betrayal, no storm was strong enough. You gave me back my children. You gave me back myself. And now I want to provide you with forever. Will you marry me?" Grace's hands flew to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision as the children chanted, "Say yes, Mommy Grace." Her voice broke, but it was clear. Yes. 1,000 times yes. William slipped the ring onto her finger. The children cheered, and Grace felt the world finally align. Not perfect, not painless, but hers. Theirs. Weeks later, the wedding was intimate but radiant. Friends, allies, even strangers who had once doubted her, now celebrated with them. Grace walked down the aisle, not as the disgraced Allen daughter, but as a woman reborn. William whispered against her lips as vows were exchanged. This time, no secrets, no shadows, only us. And when the kiss sealed their forever, the applause wasn't just for love, it was for survival, triumph, and truth. Grace looked out at the world, her children laughing, William's hand in hers, and knew the storm had passed. And dawn had come. The story of William and Grace comes to a close here, but the light of love and faith will never fade. If you've walked with them through pain, tears, and finally to that overwhelming happiness, leave a comment, share your thoughts and feelings. Subscribe, follow, and stay with us so you won't miss the following stories, tales that will continue to touch your heart, just like the journey of William and Grace has. Because after all the darkness, the light of love always finds its way back.